Is Death Stranding already Game of the Year?
Well, critics seem to think so.
Hot take. Kojima.
All right, so Death Stranding reviews came out this week, and there's a lot of talk now about, is this the game of the year?
Yeah.
Now, we can't really comment on it because the game's not out yet, so we haven't played it. However, 2019, there's been quite a few games that have come out already that we can talk about. And between you and I, we have quite a diverse set of games that we've played. We play very different style of games. So far in 2019, what do you think are your contenders for your own personal opinion, your favorite games this year?
I've got a couple. Look, folks, this whole conversation with Death Stranding has really spurred this, only because there's so many reviews out there that are largely negative or largely positive. And in my opinion, the way I've seen things play out in the past is that usually for a game of the year to be chosen, the consensus has to be in general that the game is very good. So seeing this imbalance makes me think that Death Stranding might not be the game of the year that everyone assumes is going to be, but there were other games I played that I think might surpass it. Now, I haven't played Death Stranding. Like we both said, we both haven't.
Yep.
So I'm holding off from saying anything definitively until I've played it.
I am curious about it, though.
Oh, yeah.
It's got me hooked, and I'm not a big Kojima fan, as in I've not played many of his games. But this, and I haven't even really been that interested in Death Stranding over the years. But the marketing worked it over on me. I'm just like, what is this game about? I just got to try it.
Yeah.
And it looks like something to be experienced.
Yeah, absolutely. Kojima's games are a big deal for me. I've been a fan of his practically since forever. I've played translated versions of his MSX games prior to the actually official release of them. I've played variations of Snatcher on multiple systems that are not in English, just so I could see the differences. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of a ton of the games he's been involved in, even ones that are associated with the properties. Like one of my favorite PSP games of all time is Metal Gear Acid. Maybe it's not your favorite PSP game. I'm quite sure it isn't, but it's one of my favorites. Now, with that being said, my first choice for games that I'm looking at right now, I'm not going to say it's the best because I don't think it's the best, but it definitely is a contender. The Outer Wilds. Not The Outer Worlds, The Outer Wilds.
That's an indie game, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Now, this is something that happened to me in 2019. Now, I know you and I have a differing opinion on this. For you, 2019, not so good?
Not so strong. You look at 2018, you had God of War, you had Spider-Man, you had big games that I was just falling in love with. And in 2019, all the big releases, even the ones I had hype for, I played it and I just couldn't get hooked. In fact, I'm playing older games. Like I'm going through my backlog and I'm finding way more enjoyment in that.
I get that, yeah. And for me, 2019 has been a complete change. Games I would expect not to be a success ended up being really fun for me. And The Outer Wilds is one of those games. When I first saw it, it looked really interesting. The game is basically a space game where you're an astronaut and you're going into like a little spaceship and you're flying through the sky. I'm not going to spoil the narrative of the story, but what ends up happening is pretty soon after you've launched, you die. And,
What?
and when you die, everything rewinds. But other astronauts, or the astronaut that you are, is actually like aware of the fact that time is rewound. So you keep going back out, you keep doing things, you keep dying, you keep rewinding.
So you have the power to rewind time, or this is a mechanism?
It's a mechanism that automatically happens when you die.
Oh, okay.
And it's built into the narrative, it's built into the world. There's tons of exploration. Think of it the same way that we've seen other games that deal with like walking from building to building. This is treating that with big worlds that you can explore. And they're not massive, insurmountable objects that you can't go around, but there's a lot of really interesting aspects to it. The game is an indie game. It isn't 100% perfect. There's a lot of pieces here and there that aren't working 100%. The game was sent in to me originally on the Xbox One, and I got to play it that way, and it felt like a very fun, really cool game. I keep playing it, even though there's like a little bit of looseness here and there, but I've been enjoying my experience with it even though.
But it's there's a really good narrative to it.
Yeah, it's basically like you're not really playing it for the gameplay specifically, but it's not a first-person shooter. It's nothing like that.
Okay.
There's puzzles, there's things like that. It kind of plays with you a bit as you would assume a game that basically goes back in time would. But what I've played of it so far, the narrative is throwing me in this interesting direction. There's no voiceover, it's all reading, but I've been enjoying that kind of aspect. Like you're going to like another spaceship or another planet, you're reading things, you're talking to people, and you're kind of building this world up and figuring out what it actually means.
Oh, really cool. Well, my pick is actually going to be also an indie game, but before we get to that, I just want to shout out Kingdom Hearts 3, which I almost forgot came out this year, but it did come out in February, and it is one of my most disappointed hype games. I used to be a big Kingdom Hearts fan. I waited 10 years for this game to come out. It should have been a Game of the Year contender for me. And to be fair, I played the entire game. I've platinumed it. one of my few platinums. But the Kingdom Hearts franchise has really devolved, in my opinion, since like there was Kingdom Hearts, was Kingdom Hearts 2, then it went in all sorts of directions, and then it came back to Kingdom Hearts 3 for some sort of closure.
It's a very long-running franchise. I played bits and pieces of the earlier games, and Kingdom Hearts 3 I played at an event briefly, and that's not how you should be playing any kind of RPG, folks. Like 2 seconds of an RPG, you might as well just not have played it. But the gameplay I played was more or less the combat, which I totally didn't like.
Oh, see, I like the combat.
Oh, that
I didn't like the
work for me.
story of Kingdom Hearts 3, which is kind of the core of an RPG.
Well, yeah, but I don't think I'm gonna get roasted for this. Kingdom Hearts doesn't have a good story, even from looking on the outside. It's too many Like, look, folks, if you read a book, the book has a beginning, middle, and an end. Kingdom Hearts don't work that way. Kingdom Hearts, there's no book, there's nothing. It's just random, and every story feels the same way. And I know there's a couple YouTubers out there that have actually tried to give you the entire narrative in the story, and I've watched them to try and get into 3, but it's simply not going to happen. I have to go all the way back to the beginning of the franchise and play them. There are some pretty good collections out there to do that, but yeah, that game would not even be near my list because I wouldn't know where to begin with it.
The first one is real, and we're talking way too much about Kingdom Hearts already, but the first one is the one that I felt had the most concise story, where your main character had a purpose, had a drive, and you were invested in the character. And now the third one's like, well, you know what? I've been on this boat for 10 years. I need to follow it and see where the ending is. But anyways, to my indie game that really surprised me is the freaking Goose game. Untitled Goose game.
Untitled Goose game.
Everybody, you guys have seen the memes, surely. It's everywhere. It's so simple. You're a goose and you're creating havoc, and that's all. You just try to get away with it. It has been the most satisfying, surprising game for me. And no joke, this is a game that is so unique, so clever, so simple, but executed so well that I have to say this belongs in the conversation for any game of the year, just because they really went out of their way to think of something really clever, and they executed it so well. My first 5 minutes of playing this Goose game, I kid you not, I just walked around a pond laughing at the goose because they had the animation down so good.
I see that. I haven't played it myself.
You haven't tried it, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
it's something I do want to play eventually, but I've just been kind of holding off. It is a Nintendo Switch game, exclusive to consoles on that platform, but it's also available on the Epic Game Store, I believe, which makes it a game that not everyone can get into right away. But yeah, I'm going to try it out eventually. It definitely looks like I've heard someone say that it's almost Hitman with a goose, because you're basically trying to achieve weird goals, which is kind of what Hitman's about. You're trying to set things up in a way to cause problems.
Yeah, exactly. Except there's more satisfying animation because you're a goose.
I guess so. All right, so another game, and we both played this one, and Zelda: Link's Awakening.
This one's interesting.
Yeah,
because it's an old game.
Yeah, this is hard. I want to treat this like it's a 2019 game. The mechanics of the game, though I believe, have aged very well. They are still much older mechanics than most modern games would be. I think the story is is the same as it ever was. It's not the most amazing story in the world for some people, but for people that grew up with it, it's important. I don't think this is going to be 2019. Like, I don't think this is going to be the game that everyone plays, but visually, I think it looks good. The gameplay is solid. I think it's a marked improvement over the original, but at its core, I believe that a lot of people that try to play it are not going to be thinking to themselves, oh, this is a whole new Zelda experience. It's just like the pit stop before the next Breath of the Wild sequel.
That's a very good way to put it, the pit stop. If anything, I think, and I agree with everything you said, but I think it belongs in the art direction conversation of the year, because it is a game that has aged well in terms of its mechanics. But now that kind of the hype of the launch has come out, I'm hearing a lot of people in my social circle just saying, this is the game that I put down and I'm not itching to go back into.
Yeah, that makes
like
sense.
If they stepped away from it, they're busy with other games. And this one just isn't the one. And I feel if you're talking about game of the year, you need that itch to go back to it.
So what's your next pick?
Next pick would be, Sekiro Shadow Die Twice is a game. Beautiful game, fantastic game. I'm just worried it's too niche to win Game of the Year. And that brings up the conversation of, can a niche game win Game of the Year? To me, I think it needs to be accessible by a lot of people.
Oh, I think a niche game can if it's good enough, but I think Sekiro Shadow Die Twice, I think enough people don't like it.
Yeah.
It's, for me, from what I've seen, and unfortunately I haven't played it again, but it is one of those games, it's kind of like Dark Souls and stuff like that, where you have very extremely difficult gameplay, though everything I have seen about it has been this divisive argument where a lot of people really seem to like the gameplay, but there's a lot of other people that don't find it's as fun as other Souls-like experiences.
Yeah.
I do want to give it a shot, but I know at its core it's a game that I'm not going to be a huge fan of just because of certain mechanics that they implement in it that I've seen.
Right.
I've watched the game from afar. It will be a game I play eventually, but I know it's one that I'm not personally going to like.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what would be your next pick then?
Oh, this one's easy. The Outer Worlds. Folks, this is this is it. This is a game that I totally lowered my expectations on, like to the bottom, mostly because I didn't want to expect a full open world experience game that was similar to Fallout 3 or New Vegas, because I didn't believe that the company that's making it, Obsidian, had the funding to do it. Now, if you don't know, Obsidian originally made New Vegas, and most people think New Vegas is the best of the newer Fallout games, and I'm one of those people. I think it's a fantastic game, but Outer Worlds totally blew past my expectations. Everything I thought would be limited was expanded upon. They used the issues they had being a smaller team, and they figured out solutions to make the game work in those confines. The best way to explain this is it's not one persistent open world where you're walking around one landscape. There's aspects of it that are all over, that basically different planets and stuff like that. I don't want to spoil too much of the story at all, but the story is still driving me along. It's still keeping me going there. I'm very close to beating it, but so far, this one is like one of my senior top picks. Like this one is like, oh boy, I really like the narrative. I like the gameplay. It feels much older. It feels like an older Fallout game, but I mean, I don't dislike that. It feels like New Vegas with some improvements. And it's funny because you can clearly tell the division between where Fallout went with Fallout 4 and where Obsidian went with this. I don't believe that this company was aware of just how good they are. Yeah. And like it's just so good. The writing on it, the characters. I really fall in love with that world a lot more. The best way I can explain this is it's Mass Effect plus Fallout New Vegas together in one game. That's really what this is.
I've been really curious about this one, and the fact that you've been talking about it so much since you've started playing it really is selling me on wanting to play it. So this is one I'm going to be trying out in the coming weeks.
I think you should.
Yes, yeah. I will. There's one last one I want to talk about. Actually, two last ones real quick. Cadence of Hyrule, I think that is, if we're going to talk Zelda games, we mentioned Link's Awakening. I think Cadence of Hyrule is really something that did something new in 2019, which is exciting. Which is another indie game, but I'm loving what I'm seeing in the indie scene this year.
But do you think 2019 game of? I mean, like,
no. I'm just saying. I think like I don't know. Actually, it's really good. It's really accessible. I don't think it's going to be considered, but it's one of my personal favorite picks of 2019.
It really sucks because it's not like the game's bad or anything. I'm not a big fan of the beat sequencing game type thing, but like I don't think it's bad. It's just the problem is, like, Game of the Year is this title, and the title has to apply to so many people. It's such it sucks because you can make the best Tetris game in the world, but that doesn't mean Tetris will win Game of the Year. You know, it's that kind of thing.
Now, one game I did start diving into, which again is thanks to you and your hype, is Control, because you had a lot of love for it.
Oh yeah.
And I started playing it, and I'm at the point where I'm actually starting to levitate things and throw things, and it is super satisfying. I'm not deep enough to say like this is a contender for me. Is it a contender for you though?
Okay, I would have said that Control was a contender until I played Outer Worlds.
Oh, okay.
This isn't to say Control is a bad game, because it's really not. But the problem is, if I take Outer Worlds and I look at how much time I'm enjoying, or how much time I've invested in that, how much I'm enjoying that game, and I compare it against Control, I just don't see Control living up to the same method. There's a really cool, strange storyline to Control that doesn't really feel like any other kind of game. It's atmospheric, it's dark, it's horror, but it's I think it's called industrial horror. Basically, the concept is it's all scary, but it's scary in an office space, and I'm scared of office spaces, so that works for me. So basically, it's the game that really appeals to me. It's like, this is how I like these kind of games. Like any Remedy game, the shooting mechanics and all this, the special features and stuff, totally on point. These guys have it. If I just remove myself from wanting to explore this game because of its real-time ray tracing on PC, even then, the game is still amazing. But visually, when you turn on ray tracing support, oh, wow, this game, it looks real at points, freakishly real. And I thought that was really impressive.
Well, I'm looking forward to playing it more because so far it is starting to hook me. The story was a little bit slow at first, but once I started getting into levitating powers and flying abilities and like you get your gun that reloads, love these mechanics.
Absolutely.
But I think I'm going to have a lot more to say after I see the next wave of games coming out. Death Stranding, really curious about. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, so Jedi Fallen Order. I'm not completely sold on it, but who knows? It could EA could surprise me. I really
EA
hope
could surprise you. Oh, EA can surprise anyone.
In a good way, I hope this time.
There's been so many games that have come out this year. I played a little bit of Devil May Cry 5, and I thought the story, the graphics, and the gameplay was pretty solid on that. But again, that feels like a little bit of an older game coming back again. And even though that's what Outer Worlds did, it's one of those games that I think is a little bit too niche for that. We're looking at Mortal Kombat 11, which I think a lot of people find it to be very fun. But Mortal Kombat 11 isn't just like a traditional fighter. There's a big story behind it and a lot of really interesting cutscenes and stuff. But does that make the gameplay good? That's really questionable. When we're looking at Fire Emblem, we didn't actually get into that one.
No, and that's a big one. But again, that's the thing with 2019. I find the games are just too niche.
Yes.
You're hitting these and the big games with the big marketing budgets, really, on Gears 5, Borderlands 3. I'm not hearing a lot of people talk about those games anymore.
No, because I think they really fell through really quick. Like Luigi's Mansion 3 launching just around Halloween, and a lot of people are really talking about this being one of the best games released on the Switch this year, outside of Untitled Goose Game, I guess. But the problem is that it's part 3 to a series that people didn't play a lot of. I mean, Luigi's Mansion 1 was on GameCube. The sequel was on 3DS. And look, folks, I'm not going to say 3 is a bad game. I've played a little bit of it and I really liked it. But the problem is that the majority of people out there that would make the choice of this game being Game of the Year are likely not going to be getting into it because they see a number 3 at the end. And there's not even a number 2, right? There is no number 2 Luigi's Mansion. So people are just going to be like, I don't know. Should I 3 in? I probably should know the story at this point.
Exactly.
You could play 3 without knowing anything from the other games, by the way.
Luigi just doesn't pull the same weight as Mario or Link or Zelda and all that. So
yeah, you put Mario's name with hotel and actually don't do that.
No, bad idea.
Yeah,
bad idea.
But you know, there are definitely a bunch of games out there that are contenders for this year. We mentioned a couple of our own, but what games did you play that you're pretty excited about? Was there an indie game? Was it a big release? Or maybe it's a game that nobody really knows about?
Let us know in the comments. And until next time, keep it classy.